It's the Behind the Shade show.
From a romantic relationship standpoint, then, how important is it for, let's say, me and my personality type to understand the personality type of my partner so we can grow together instead of growing at odds?
Oh, it's everything. My beloved, my guy, I'm constantly bringing up kind of what his personality type is. It's different than my own. He moves a lot faster, so his personality type, he's assertive, and he moves a lot faster than me. And he knows that I need to take a little bit more time and space. And because he's aware of that, he's able to go, oh, okay, yes, no, take your time. And he understands that I'm going to need more time than he is to, let's say, get ready or if we're going to go somewhere. Um, it takes more time for me to get a thought out that is a new thought. And so sometimes I pause and I need him to be silent and just listen. And and then I know for him, he feels loved when I am willing to try something new because he has a very adventurous personality. He likes to try new things. And so I know to enter his world, it's going to help me grow because I am going to be more adventurous to try new things with my guy. And with him, he appreciates that I help him ground and slow down. And so if we weren't conscious of this, it would be super easy to make up stories about one another that aren't true. But because we understand each other's differences, we understand what each other needs in order to recharge our batteries, it becomes more of this dance that is more enjoyable. And there's less, again, it's all about the stories we make up in our heads. And personality assessments simply help shine the light on the truth of how we're wired, and it dispels those toxic stories that tend to keep us apart and tend to feed on conflict.
When you mentioned the story of the villain, it got me thinking that we all enjoy the journey, right? Like a hero's journey, we usually hear that story at the end, right? They save their village. We can all relate to that act, but we don't know necessarily why they wanted to become the hero. Whereas the villain arc, when you look at on an individual level, I think we all can relate because we all feel inside of us that we're that one moment away from maybe doing something that would have compromised who we were, right? Maybe there's like a tragic death in your family, or maybe there's a bad breakup. You lost your job and you're like, okay, I may need to do some things that 2 hours earlier I wouldn't have done. And when you mentioned the growth and the different personalities that you and your partner have and you guys are communicating, I think that's the part that a lot of people probably miss is that you have to talk about it. Right? There's a sense of like arrogance where it's like, man, do you know what? Everyone is like me. All 8 billion people. They like the same thing as I like. They don't like the same things I like. Why do you think some people get caught up within their own world when they're trying to help other people and say that, okay, I'm going to assume Mandy likes these things because I like these things?
It's a lot of it is fear. Believe it or not, a lot of it is fear because what so what trauma does, we hear that word trauma more now, and my favorite definition is from Dr. Gabor Mate, where he says trauma is a disconnect from our authentic self, from our true self. And the more trauma someone experiences, the more constricted they are, the tighter they are. So when you describe, let's say, a person that just assumes things and lacks curiosity, to me, the sign of a very healthy human is someone who's extremely curious. Someone who is carrying a lot of trauma is less curious, and it's because they don't have the bandwidth. I think of like a scared child in the corner, just crouched down, right? They're white knuckling life. And so it's more about their psyche is not able to expand and to be able to uh, allow themselves to be curious. And so going back to, I don't think I fully answered your question from earlier about worth. How do we create more self-worth? It's something that is not just magically given. It's something that is created. I know for myself, I have a lot more self-worth today than I ever have. And it's because I've had to do things where I had to choose myself instead of pleasing others. And every time I did that, there was usually a price to pay. Because if you go from, I was a chronic people pleaser. I mean, as people pleasing as you could, like if you and I were friends, there's Mandy, I'm moving Saturday. You want to come over at 7 a.m. to help me move? I'd be like, yeah, even though I didn't want to, right? It was because I was so afraid of losing that connection and that attachment. And so when I went from being a people pleaser to starting to love myself, I lost a lot of people in my life. And it was painful and it hurt and it sucked. I'm not going to lie. But the beauty and the benefit is I was regaining myself. So you think of self-worth, every time we make a choice that is honoring ourselves, especially those choices that are scary, especially those choices that have a lot of resistance, that's when this internal self-worth is created. It's not something that can be gained by affirmations. Believe me, I've tried. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with affirmations, but I'm talking more about it's those times when the friends say, hey, will you help me with this? Or you come over for that and you don't want to. And you say, no, thanks. I'm going to stay home. No, thanks. I'm going to take care of myself. And then they get upset with you and you stay firm in honoring yourself. That's how self worth is created. It takes a lot of grit and courage. I find that there's many people out there selling things that create self-worth that really don't. It takes a lot of grit and courage, and there's just no way around it. The journey can be very challenging, but well worth it.
What you just described and what you shared seems like you and I have a similar personality because I went through that same experience in my 20s. I always felt that I was going to be working with people, helping people. But because that was in my personality, it led me to people pleasing. I didn't have the boundaries because in our 20s, do we even know what boundaries are? Like, what the hell is a boundary, right?
No, didn't know what a
Um,
boundary was.
no, I played sports. I knew what a boundary on a field was, but I didn't know
Yes.
what an emotional boundary was. And then I got the house that I'm currently living now, which was later on in my 20s. And then I invited those people that I was people pleasing. And one of them said, Terrain, why is it that you can get a house and I can't? That's when I knew something had to change. Like addicts, that was my rock bottom. I was like, wow, the people that I've been pleasing for all these years, my moment of happiness, and one person made it about them. I went on a journey because everything started to make sense, right? It's like that song, I can see clearly now the rain is
Yes.
gone, right? It was
Yes.
just like that. And to
Yes.
your point, I paid a price. The circle of friends, later on that year, I didn't have them. I was experiencing loneliness in my success. The more successful I became in my job and more successful I became in my life, the less people wanted to be around. Terrain, you changed. You're not one of us anymore. What are some of the impacts that some people face when they're on this journey and they begin to lose some people and now they're starting to feel the pain of their emotional success?
Oh, Terrain, thank you for sharing that with me. And I love that you had the courage to go through that and to see that versus what happens with so many people is they can fall back because it's too scary, it's too painful. I think the first thing is to understand that if you're going through that and you're experiencing that grief and that loneliness, believe it or not, you're actually on the right track. I think when we're in pain, it's very easy for our brain to go, I'm doing something wrong. This is wrong. I need to fix it. It's part of the journey. Jim Carrey says that, the way to liberation is through a river of tears. And it's like when we're grieving and we're crying and we're feeling that pain of that loneliness. I used to be terrified to be alone. I used to not like to be home alone in my house. And when I asked my husband at the time to move out and we got divorced, I had to face that fear of being alone. And I never had in my life experienced so many people not like me until I started setting boundaries. So now I was experiencing my fear of being alone, and I was also experiencing what it felt like to be the villain in someone else's story because I set boundaries. And it sucked. It did not feel good. And I think it's important, I think the more people like you and I that share the the journey that we went through, that hey, yeah, if you feel lonely, if you're scared, if you're crying, you're actually on track. You're actually going, that is part of the journey. Now, you don't need to do it alone. That is when you do find the beautiful souls who can stand there in your pain. I became extremely close to my now 25-year-old niece. She was one of the only people who could sit by me when I was crying and the snot's coming out and give me toilet paper and make me peppermint tea. She was one of the only people. I would have never known that my niece Kendall had that ability until I went through that. And so the part of the beautiful part of the dark night of the soul is you find who really has your back, who really can be there for you. And it's usually not who you would ever predict. It's usually a surprise. So I think it's important to know that it's okay. It's okay. And it won't last forever. I think that's something that is a good reminder. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, my thoughts is remind me of the movie, since you mentioned Dark Knight, remind me of Batman movie where it says that you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. And when you're on your healing journey, it feels like you're going to live forever because the journey is not short, but you will become the villain in someone's story because unfortunately there are people that don't want you to change, because if you're a people pleaser like you and I shared, Mandy, buy me a chair, pay for my flight, buy me food, deliver this. You stop doing that. Oh my God, I gotta do these things for myself. Well, yeah, it's called growing up. Let's be an adult and I'll stop relying on people. But unfortunately, there's a victim that graduates every June. There's always going to be someone else to be used and abused. So my thoughts are I absolutely agree because I've seen it. I've seen people make the change. They see the people around them for who they are now because the mask has fallen, the veil has been taken off. But what happens is sometimes they'll get sucked back in because they're like, to our earlier point, maybe I'm not worthy enough to join this group over here who are further along in their journey. Or they become even more destructive to themselves because now they got to go back and prove to the people that they were leaving. No, no, no. I'm still like you guys. I'm going to be even more toxic, even more chaotic, even more destructive.